What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the show. This week's guest, Luke Henry, is a GoBundance member, fairly recent, out of Marion, Ohio, right around the Columbus area. And he's got a bunch of stuff going on. He's a former pharmacist. He's got a landscaping company. He's got a wedding event venue. He's got a hair salon, a restaurant, an ice cream place. He's developing pretty much the entirety of his downtown in his hometown, doing a bunch of stuff. Luke, welcome.
Yeah, good to be here, Jamie. Thanks, man.
No, it's great to have you. Great to have you. We got to connect when you joined, so I'm interested to hear a bit more about your story. So let's go back a little bit. So, Marion, Ohio, born and raised, or where you're from? Kind of give us the backstory.
Yeah, nearby, little town, Mount Gilead, Ohio. Grew up there, went to high school there. Both of my grandparents were all farmers, and so heavily influenced by kind of the very agricultural community. My grandparents were farmers, saw that work ethic in them. They instilled that in my parents. My parents were not farmers. They both worked for the government. So I learned a little bit about what I didn't like about some of what I saw, them having to do dealing with bureaucracy all the time and some of that. But didn't really grow up in a small business family, again, except for kind of seeing it through my grandparents with farming and stuff. But street smart with money, really learned a lot from them, and I think that definitely had an impact on me.
Makes sense. So, yeah, continue. Go ahead.
Yeah. So then I started mowing grass when I was in junior high. I got my first mowing job from my great aunt and uncle. Took me 2.5 hours. They paid me $5 to mow their yard when I was in junior high. And, that was like big money at the time. So I decided I loved it. I loved the roar of the mower, the smell of the grass, sunshine on my face, so it was great. So I decided, I can make a buck doing this. I'm going to go for it. So, picked up a few more lawns, and, this is kind of the story of lots of, preteens and teenage kids, and had a little money in my pocket, bought a little nicer mower, then another one, and then I got my driver's license and bought a trailer and another mower, and that became a means of putting myself through pharmacy school. So I went and got a doctor of pharmacy degree, put myself through pharmacy school doing landscaping, and then was a pharmacist for a couple of years, as you should be, having spent all that time in school. And then went on from there. Also, while in college, I bought my first rental property when I was 19. I bought it in the town where I went to college, and started renting out some rooms to my friends, and made a few dollars that way. So that kind of got me hooked on real estate a little bit. Kept buying real estate through the years, and after my wife and I got married, before we had kids. And then 4 years ago, I had what my wife refers to as a midlife crisis, I think. And she said she wishes I would have just bought a convertible or something. It would have been, less cheaper and less stressful. But linked up with a business partner and bought a bunch of old abandoned buildings in our downtown. We had a vision for a 1 block area where we wanted to revitalize. So we quietly went around, bought some buildings, and then released our grand vision, got people really excited, started to get some momentum, and then started to bring some potential tenants in to go into some of these buildings, some people that do an ice cream shop or a coffee shop and some of these types of things. And, we bring them through these, really rough buildings, and they're like, hey, we can see the vision. It could be great, I'm sure. But, it's a little too early for us. So, no thanks. So we were undeterred, and, kind of ever the optimist and entrepreneur. I said, no problem. We'll just operate the businesses ourselves. We'll just, open up these places and we'll just operate them ourselves. So, we did, and we are. So that's kind of where we're at.
Now, talk to me about unit count prior to all of this, prior to you getting married. You said you were buying properties from 19 on. When you got married, where were you from, like a financial freedom, real estate, passive income, unit count, whatever? What did it look like at that point?
Yeah, well, I got married pretty young. I was 22. My wife was 21. So I just at the time only had the one, place, college house, basically, is huge house, 5 bedrooms. And so we just had that one place. And then she and I rented this little tiny postage stamp of a house around the corner from there. We were still in college. So we were poor for a while. But once I graduated, I was a pharmacist. My wife was a teacher. We started buying a few rental homes and kind of went from there. But then before we started investing in downtown stuff, we had about like 20, 25, doors, single family, smaller multifamily, that kind of thing.
Now, give me an idea of Marion. Is this a town that I don't know it? I mean, it's in Ohio. I live in Michigan, so I can say it. It's in the
Yeah.
Rust Belt,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
it's a derogatory term. I think if it's somebody outside of here saying it about us, it's like no. But here we could call it that, right?
Exactly. You're right.
But is this a town when you said, okay, we want to redevelop our downtown? Is this a town that had growing population, declining population? Was it a high poverty rate? Like, give me an idea of what the dynamics were of Marion when you decided to invest and start to redevelop the downtown.
Yeah. Yeah. So it is like a lot of, cities in Ohio and Michigan, Pennsylvania and Indiana, kind of Rust Belt cities, history of manufacturing. Some of those jobs went away. A few decades ago, the downtown was, it used to be where it's at, where, that's how it is in a lot of towns our size. So to give you an idea, it's about 35,000 people in the city, 65,000 people in the county. So, not super tiny, but, not a metropolitan area by any means. But, yeah, I mean, Marion kind of, had a bad rap a little bit with, just for the same reasons as a lot of cities of the size do,
Yeah.
drugs, some, rough parts of town. Again, the downtown had just been, kind of neglected for a few decades when, things went to malls and to other places, and the downtown was no longer the community center of the city. And so just a lot of the buildings had fallen into disrepair. And the block where we started was actually the oldest block in Marion. So the first building that we bought was actually built in 1832. And some of the buildings were built in the 1850s, 1860s, 1870s. So these are some of the oldest buildings in our community, and they are in rough shape. Even the ones that were, nicer had, some structural issues. And, I mean, the one of them, it was a saddle shop when it was first built. I mean, you think about it, like they didn't have cars. I mean, the place where people get saddles for their horses. I mean, it's just a tiny, brick place. And then they kept building onto it as the years went by.
Pretty cool though, right? It's got amazing history, the significance of it. How, if you don't mind me asking, how much that first building, what was it? Like, give me an idea, like retail space with some like what was that building and what did you have to pay for that building?
Yeah. So that building, our very first project, this place that we bought several of them at once before we kind of, released our plans. But our very first project that we completed, when we bought it, it was a tattoo parlor, and it was a dark, dingy, tattoos and piercings, and just kind of a sketchy place. It had been that for like 20 or 30 years, but it was the building that was almost 200 years old. We paid $20,000 for it, and it was just dingy and kind of nasty. It was a 2-story building, nothing upstairs, and then just the single tenant space. So it was one of the smaller buildings that we have, but we put about $75,000 into it, and then that was the one that we turned into an ice cream shop. So now it's bright colors, and we took off like 7 layers of flooring. And we took off, 3 layers of paneling and then broken plaster behind that. And we're just chipping away all this. And we found a wall that was actually made of limestone, not even brick, Ohio limestone from the 1830s. Just, super cool. We made that like an accent, kind of statement wall as soon as you walk in the front door. But that was our very first project. So
what was a fun one. What was the bet you were taking on Marion? So, and I want to talk about like, maybe just we'll advance and say, well, like now what do you own and all that? We don't have to go building by building, but what is the bet you were taking on Marion? Like, what did you see? Was it just nostalgia? It ain't that expensive. We can swing and miss and be okay. I got a good job. My wife makes a good living. We got these other 20 units of real estate. My partner and I are going to like, it's just like, hey, we love this town. We want to do it. Or were there some dynamics in play that you saw coming that got you out in front of this? Like, why do it?
Yeah. But it was a little bit of all of that. So, my business partner and I had just known each other for a year or two. He kind of started the same way as me, single family homes, rentals, and he had some interest in downtown. I had a buddy of mine that had done a lot of work in another community in Ohio and was having a lot of success and building momentum. I had introduced them, and, so we're just kind of like seeing that this could be possible from others. And then, we looked around and saw the need, and we had lunch one day and we sat out on the front. There was one restaurant on this block where we bought most of our buildings, and it had been there a while. A lady with a great personality, good food, Argentinian, lady, and she just has a big personality, and, was able to keep this thing afloat. And but we sat out on her front sidewalk and we looked around at just all these buildings. I mean, most of them were vacant or had been underutilized for many, many years. And, I said to him, if we don't do it, who's going to? Who's going to fight for our community? Who's going to do this stuff? We believe that it could be, longer term also, economically viable and hopefully fruitful for us. But, it was kind of just a play of, this is our community. This is where, my wife grew up in this community. I grew up one community over. Our kids are going to school in this community, and we want it to be better, for our kids and for, the people that we care about. And so, if we can love this one little block, if we can make a really big impact on this one little block, and this is in the heart of our community, those ripples we believe could be seen, rippling out from here. And so, we did see some other signs of momentum. We saw some other people that were either talking about or had done some projects downtown, and they were starting to get the ball rolling a little bit. And we saw, some other things coming to town, and just some of the signs that were like, okay, I see some glistening here that there could be, some really good things coming. And, we'd seen some cool things open and close. Unfortunately, in the downtown, we'd see a new restaurant, we'd see a new store come, but there just wasn't enough like critical mass to get people, to really adopt it as an entertainment district. So we said, if we could chunk off this one block and we could, make it a place where people would come for dining and entertainment and community, then we could really turn this into something that, would be a draw, not only for our community, but for others, to come in and be able to, spend time together and shop and eat and, do those fun things.
I'm very curious about the ripple effect, but before I ask that question, just sort of take me from that building to now. And if you could, in this, paint the picture of downtown. When you say block, is it like a 1 street, 4 block downtown? Is it, like 2-3 streets wide and there's like 7-8 blocks total? Like, give me an idea of downtown and tell me what your, where you are today with it. You've got these different businesses, but how many buildings do you own? Maybe as a percentage of downtown. Just give me context for what this downtown looks like and what you have there.
Yeah. So the downtown, I guess it depends on who you talk to, how you exactly define downtown, but it's, 2 or 3 kind of main streets going east and west, and then probably, 4 streets going north and south, and then kind of the blocks in between them. So, 10 blocks or something like that, probably total, at the max, I'd say that's, kind of the walkable downtown, call it. The block that we bought the buildings on, where we've most heavily invested, is probably about 20 buildings. I think I counted it here recently. Now I can't remember. 20-ish buildings on this, one block where we made an investment. And right now we own over half of them on this block. And we bought 8 before we kind of told anybody what we were doing. We just went around quietly and kind of brokered some deals privately, where there was a couple that were for sale on the market. There were some others that we just kind of heard the people were, maybe interested in selling. They weren't doing anything with the building and some of that. So that was where our main focus was to start.
Got it. Now tell me about the ripple. It sounds like a few other people were coming downtown, developing. Have you seen what you've envisioned, this entertainment and dining district downtown? Have you created that? Is it there? Is it vibrant? What's happening now?
Yeah. So remember, we started this like 3.5 years ago was when we first met. 3 years ago was when we started our first project, and 2 years ago was when everything shut down with COVID.
True.
So, we've definitely had the cards stacked against us. We were already going against the grain. No, people told us there was no way that we could do this, that we were stupid, we were wasting our money, we just demolish the buildings and make parking lots, those kinds of things. And we're like, no, we can do this. And then COVID came, and then we're like, oh, maybe we can't do this. This is really hard, because our next project, kind of our flagship project, was our wedding event venue. And this is where I'm sitting. I'm in the bridal lounge part of the building, but it was a building that had been vacant for 40 years. There had been a fire in the 70s, and nobody had ever repaired it. It had just been used as just basically a warehouse for a contractor who wanted a cheap place to, hold all his extra materials and junk and dump his extra debris when jobs were over and everything. And so we saw a vision here for a wedding event venue that was really cool, exposed brick and exposed beams and original hardwood floors, and an outdoor courtyard with a roll-up glass garage door where we could seat people for weddings. And that's what we created. It took about a year. It was about $1 million project. It's our very, first big project. And, banks didn't really want to, work with us. And even though we had, other real estate and, had other businesses, that we thought we could prove, banks weren't real interested in the project, and nobody had proven that, this type of thing could be viable. So we did it. We finished it. It was gorgeous. We had our first 5 events there. We were open for 3 weeks. We had booked 30 weddings before we even finished the construction project. And then we were shut down for COVID for 2 months. And so it's been a rough go, but now we're kind of back, fully operational. We had about 50 weddings last year, 50 weddings this year. People are coming from states away. We get a lot from Cleveland, Ohio, Cincinnati, Toledo. We've had couples from Detroit, New York City. It's really crazy, but it's turned into a great thing. So that was kind of our flagship thing. And then we've, built out from there. Meanwhile, as we've been doing this on this block, we've also seen a microbrewery that opened on this block. Really nice, really popular. New restaurant, barbecue restaurant right across the street. There's a corner grocery store that's a great amenity, because we're not only doing commercial, we're doing residential, loft living as well in these places. So, we're starting to see more and more of that other momentum. Several new boutique stores, 3 other restaurants just opened in the last 6 months. So, within, a block or so. So we are really starting to see the momentum and the ripple effect as we're going forward here.
Are your restaurant, ice cream shop, hair salon, are these businesses becoming profitable at this point? I mean, that's a great point about COVID. I mean, it's how soon we forget. Not that it's, quote unquote over, I guess, but it's over. And are you seeing are these businesses starting to become more viable? These other businesses that you own? It sounds like downtown's booming. It's starting to really boom. But are you seeing the impact yet, or is it more maybe a summertime thing that you're anticipating?
Yeah. We're really hoping that this is going to be kind of the first year, like somewhat, COVID free. Even last year there was, a few months in the summer, we're like, man, this is good. This is, this is what we were hoping for. We're getting there. And then, it kind of dove down again. But this year I think is really going to be the one, where we start to see, more and more momentum, a lot more, again, walkability, people getting out, even last year, a year and a half into COVID, numbers were way down. There were still people that, just weren't going out. And so when you're already, again, trying to train new habits with people and that sort of thing, when you then have a percentage of people that you don't even have an opportunity to reach because they're not leaving their homes, or they're not going out to, eat in restaurants and some of that kind of thing, makes it, even more challenging.
Interesting. Yeah. Downtown here, it's funny, today after I did a spin class or whatever, and then I went to this little market, like a natural market. They make smoothies, like, all natural smoothies. So I called them, I ordered it, I walked in to pay, and I was like, whoa, where's the plexiglass? They took the plexiglass like barrier down. They're like, so I think people have kind of moved on, whether we as a society are supposed to or not. I think people are starting to move on from this whole thing. That's amazing, man. I want to ask you this, because Let's start with this. I want to dive in a little bit on 4 years ago. You mentioned your wife called it a midlife crisis, right? So you go through this thing, and rather than buy the Corvette or the convertible, like you said, you buy a city, and or you start the process at least of buying a
Yeah,
city.
right.
Take me through that period. I mean, midlife crisis, maybe not. I don't know. But what was going on for you? You were a pharmacist, you had success, and this is near and dear to my heart, obviously, with the whole, I think we're about the same age, right? Like that 40-ish range, and you start to get more perspective on maybe how fast life goes. And
Yeah.
tell me about what happened that made you say, enough with the pharmacist thing, and I'm going to go this route.
Yeah. Well, honestly, I hadn't been a full-time pharmacist since 2009. I was only a pharmacist from 2007 to 2009. Spent $200,000 on pharmacy school, worked 2 years. And then I worked a few years after that, kind of like contingent part-time and
It was
stuff.
like
And
through 2017-ish, maybe. Is that when you kind of like stopped
I
altogether?
think so. And yeah, that's about when I let my license lapse. I just said, I'm literally never going to go back to doing that. I kept paying, doing my continuing education and stuff like that. And I kind of had this whole like little ceremony. I went out in the driveway with my wife and burned my pharmacy license, in our driveway, and just said, it's like kind of, ceremonial and symbolic of the fact that, like I'm never going back
Right.
to, feeling like I have to work, for somebody else. We've created this life, and we've created businesses. We're giving others opportunities. We're creating opportunities for ourselves and our family. And, we're never going to go back to that. So 4 years ago, I was, 35 years old, and I built a pretty, successful business. We were making a little money there, and had, again, 25 rental properties, and they're paying for themselves and creating cash flow. And my wife didn't work. She stopped teaching when we had our first child 11 years ago. And so, life was kind of good. I mean, we were kind of cruising, but I just kind of had this feeling, I really want to, leave a lasting impact on our community. And I saw this need, and I said, I believe that I know business and I know real estate well enough. Little did I know, I knew nothing about developing commercial real estate. I mean, I look back now and it's like embarrassing, like how naive I was to think, about some of these projects. But, it's like I'm the type, and, my business partner's just like, just figure it out. I mean, we know that we don't know much. We don't want to be completely foolish. We tried to educate ourselves a little bit on some things, but sometimes if you knew how hard it was going to be, you may never start. So I'm just like, we'll just do it. We'll figure it out. We're committed. At that point, we had a lot of skin in the game, and there was only one way that we could go, was out of the hole and towards the vision.
I love that, man. I think it's jumping in the pool, right? You don't commit until you're in the pool. Now you're wet, and now you got to figure out how to swim in that pool, right? Like, but to your point, it's anything. Parenthood, you don't know. I mean, you could plan for your kids, of course you do. Like, I make sure I have all the right stuff, but you don't know until you
You're
have
never
the
prepared.
kids. And when you've like, oh, there's 20 years of trauma. I just created 20 years of trauma, right? Whatever, right? As a real estate owner, you can listen to every podcast in the world. You can listen to read every book or whatever the case may be. But until you own the property and a sewer pipe goes, or,
Yeah.
What code, what zoning, what is all this?
Right.
Until you are in it, you can't know it. So you're right. You have to dive in. I heard Arnold Schwarzenegger, a quote from him is something like, I hate plan Bs. Right. Plan B is like this idea that I can go back, like, screw that. You go forward. And that's what you did, right? Burn the damn
Yeah.
license for real, right? Like you're going forward, you're rolling. Wow.
We're doing it.
All right. So you build all this, you're here today. How are you running? So maybe this goes to, we've talked a little about like superpower, and I love that topic. Like, what is it that you're great at? But, and if it plays into it, great. If not, we can discuss it separately, but you've got multiple businesses, a big portfolio of real estate, an entire downtown that you're essentially a big hand in developing at this point, right? You go through COVID. How are you managing all of, like, what is it about you that allows all of this to happen at the same time? Is that your superpower? Is there an element of your superpower in this, or is it something else?
Yeah. Well, I think that my superpower is seeing something in people that they don't maybe even see in themselves,
I like
calling that out, putting the right people into positions that maybe they're not qualified for, but helping them grow into it and helping them, build our business together. And that's, honestly, that's how I've been able to do the things that I have and develop the things that I have, is that, my landscaping business, I've got a fantastic leadership team there that leads really well. And some of those people started with me. They just worked in the field. I mean, they were pushing mowers, pushing wheelbarrows, but saw something in them, gave them opportunities. They rose to the occasion, gave them more responsibility, gave them ownership of things, not just tasks. And, they've proved themselves, and I've invested heavily in them. Something that we do at our landscaping business is, I started this about 3 or 4 years ago, is that I have a weekly leadership study that I do. It's mandatory for all of our office and leadership team. It's mandatory. It's every Wednesday morning for an hour. They get paid, but we just talk about leadership. And so we'll listen to podcasts, we'll do books. I'll do teaching just on, random things I've learned. We talk about personality assessments and just all kinds of leadership things. And it's completely multiplied our capacity and the effect that we're able to have. And now over on the real estate side, I've also, I believe, been able to do that same thing. Pulled some people in. They weren't property managers. They weren't working in real estate before, but I saw a spark in them. I saw some street smarts and some drive, pulled them into the fold, have invested in them, taught them. And now they're doing a way better job than I ever could have done at running these different elements of our businesses. And it's really, really gratifying. That's what gets me up in the morning is, hey, I'm going to have the opportunity to give somebody an opportunity, and then we're going to, build something really special together.
So are you at this point, would you consider yourself passive in your businesses? Or are you active? I mean, obviously you have activity like the leadership training every Wednesday, that sort of thing. But as far as the day-to-day operations, where are you in that? Or is it different phases at different businesses? I'm kind of curious.
Yeah, it's really kind of a dichotomy, because I have this landscaping business that's 20 years old. And, I have a great leadership team there. I have people that have been there for a decade or more, and, they're helping run that business. So I'm almost passive there. And we have a pretty good, big team. I mean, it kind of ebbs and flows seasonally through the year, but I mean, we have 100 people at a couple of different locations. And so we have, great leadership there. And so I'm somewhat passive, more visionary, more just doing the leadership teaching, kind of coming in for kind of special projects and that kind of thing. And then I, a few years ago had these little baby businesses that were just getting off the ground and, had $100 or $200 or $300,000 in revenue. And I mean, it's very small. And I'm like more active in those than I am in the big business that, is doing a lot of revenue and has a lot of team members. And so it was just very bizarre, my days, those days where it's like in this business, I'm like, helping sweep the floor and, like coach on disciplinary action and, sitting in interviews. And this one over here, I'm just talking about, where we're going to open our second location and where that's going to, how many vehicles we need to buy and stuff like that, just very high level. So it's been a kind of a crazy journey, to go back and forth between those in any given day. I mean, it's just, you never know what it's going to be.
I want to talk about COVID here in a second and just kind of where you've gone with it. But I think this plays into it. Labor has been, it seems like a post-COVID problem, right? I actually just did a post on this for my, like my personal brand is about living into what fulfills you, right? What you've done essentially. Mm-hmm. And one of those things that people fear if they have a W-2 job, they're highly paid, is like, oh my God, the security. I'm like, I don't think that exists, first of all. And second of all, if there was a time to quit, this is the market to do it, right? If there was a time to go do something for yourself, like talent, there's maybe enough out there, but there's more demand for it than there is supply. Like I'll give you for instance on landscaping. We just got a letter from our landscaper we've had for 5 years, spring cleanup, fall cleanup. We pay in advance. We're great customers, right? They come every week. We don't have enough labor. We can't handle your account anymore. So now we're scrambling to find another one. How are you finding with all these businesses that you run? How are you finding? You have a secret here, the labor, the people to come in and work in your businesses right now.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely been our biggest challenge. I mean, starting with COVID, I think so much of it comes down to the people that started, this year, last year, even, in 2020, trying to do the right things to attract people were like years too late. I think that our, I don't know that we have a secret. I wouldn't go that far at all, but I would say that, this has really separated the great cultures from the mediocre or terrible cultures. And I think that, what we have is a great team that get along. We really work to keep our values aligned. We want like-minded people. We want to make our place fun to work. We want to reward our team members, appreciate them. And, and today, of course, you have to be competitive on wages, and we've significantly increased across all of our businesses, what we're paying people the last few years. I mean, they've accelerated significantly. But beyond that, I believe that each person has a need to feel like their work matters, to be able to connect what they're doing day to day with the mission of the organization. And they have to feel, appreciated, and that it's a good place to work. So, I mean, we went kind of back to some very fundamental conversations about, in our landscaping business, for example, to say, we have a meeting and I say, hey, what do you do? I asked one of our field staff members, they say, oh, I mow. I blow leaves. I cut blocks for patios. I say, no, you give people the gift of time. Jamie, I mean, you see that with your landscaper. It's like, that gives you time with your kids on the weekend. It gives you time to go see your parents and travel and, those sorts of things. We give people a place where they're making memories with their families, where grandparents can spend time with their grandkids and, have time that is irreplaceable. And so I think when people when we can transcend just the daily tasks and make sure that people are connected to the mission, they're aligned on our values, we're reminding, why we do what we do, how we do what we do. I think those are the things that stick for the long term. Yeah. Do I occasionally have somebody that leaves me for, $3 more an hour to go work for a competitor? Yes, but not very often. And more often, we're bringing people to us that are just like, I didn't feel appreciated. I didn't feel like they, really cared if I came or not. And, we're bringing a lot of people into our different businesses, as I mentioned, from outside industries. It's kind of the big shakeup, the great resignation, right? Where, good people are out there and it's just a matter of finding them. They're probably not already working in a business like one of mine, but if they've got skills, if they've got, what it takes, then we can, attract them and we can train people how to do, unfortunately, I don't run, brain surgery outfit or anything like that. We're not building rockets, I mean, a lot of the stuff that we do is fundamentally easy, but it's not, not dummy proof. We need good people but we can train them how to do stuff.
Yeah, no, we interviewed Jeff Hoffman. Anybody can go back and listen to that episode. He's, multi-billionaire founder of Priceline and Booking.com, owner of the Marlins, part owner of the Marlins, all that. He's just an amazing guy. And we talked about labor and the new version of it today. And you just touched on it, right? You're bringing people in from other industries. And I think that investment in individuals that you bring in, as in like, I want the best for you. That's what you're essentially saying. I want the best that you can get for you.
Yeah.
It's such a simple thing, but I think it's lacking because he said it. He's like, look, people don't want to go work for Apple for the next 30 years now. They want to work on the iPhone 14. And then maybe if it's the right fit for them, that's talent, right? They'll work on the iPhone 15. Yeah. And he even said those that come in and say, I want to work for the next 30 years. He's like, be careful. Those are more parasites, right? Like, I just want you to pay me no matter what I do for the next 30 years, essentially, versus no, I believe so strongly in what I deliver that I want to do this next project. And I don't know how that relates to landscaping, but I want to do this next project or this next thing. I want to be on this next season. Right. And then let me see where it goes. Cause I know I'm good enough to be invested in by anybody. Like that's what recruiting talent is. And it sounds like encouraging that. You're encouraging the growth and development of people, period. I don't think you're trying to like, hey, only be here for a season and then go. I mean, obviously you want to keep good people, but your way of keeping good people is investing in them. And I think that's such a key component of where we are today. I think it's a post-COVID correction, to be honest with you, to some extent.
We've got to, we've got to be able to see beyond people in their role. I remind our, leaders frequently that our people that work in the field, they're not units of production. they're people, they're not quantities of man hours to hit a budget. They're people, and we've got to care about them as a person in order to keep them around. And we've got to make sure that we're, kind of doing unto them as we would want, if we were in their position. And so I think that that's an important thing. It's just, again, I think COVID has just really, exacerbated the idea of you got to treat people good, in order to keep them. There's some crummy workplaces out there, and, we don't want to be one of them. So, working real hard to do that.
No doubt. No doubt. Tell me about how all of this leads to GoBundance. So you joined, God, as of the time that we're
right around the
recording
first
this,
of the year,
right? About 2 months ago, 3 months ago. Yeah. So you've been in about two.
right around the first of the year.
What drew you to GoBundance? Give me a little bit of backstory on that, and we'll take it from there.
Yeah. Well, as I feel like as I've matured a little bit, I mean, I've just realized the value of like good people in your life and the value of relationships. I mean, I'm sure I heard many years ago, the kind of the cliche, your network is your net worth, that whole thing. And but it's really true, and I see that playing out. And I think the more I've found myself surrounding myself with good people, the more success I've found. And so, plus it's just really enjoyable and really fun to be around people that are like-minded. So, I think that I wanted to be challenged. I've heard this saying where everyone needs a student, a teacher, and a friend. And, I have a lot of people that I feel like I'm teaching and mentoring, a lot of them within, my businesses, and, obviously have friends, through our community and our church and just different things we're involved with. But, looking for more, teachers and friends that are really blowing and going and doing big things. And so I wanted to get around a bunch of like-minded individuals, heard about GoBundance, from several sources, just kind of like kept coming up. I'd hear it in a podcast and a book. And I'm like, what is this GoBundance thing? So I like sitting on the couch one evening and just Google it, and I'm reading the thing, and it's talking about kind of that lone wolf, and just feeling like sometimes you're the only one that's just like seeing this bigger picture and seeing that there's more possible, more out there, and there's stuff to do and to conquer. And sometimes the people you talk to are again, I've got some great friends that are employees, they work for somebody else, and they don't see the world the same way that I do. And so, that was what was really attractive about GoBundance. I mean, I talked to you and did a little research and watched a few videos, and I wasn't a hard sell. I think I like 3 days later, I was like, hey man, I went on and I paid my money. I'd signed up, I'm good to go. So
that growing Columbus area chapter. So you got some new friends right there, which is great.
Yeah.
What's since being in, I mean, I know you're still pretty early, but like, what are a couple of takeaways or a couple of things that you've observed or felt or whatever? I'm just kind of curious if you don't mind sharing.
Yeah. I've not met like a lot of people in person. I have really enjoyed, listening to the podcast. I feel like I've, learned about some people, and I've, sent them a message or an email, and we've, connected and kind of shared some stories and stuff like that. So that's been really fun. As an aside, two things. First of all, I do expect that this episode is going to be more popular than the one with Brandon Turner. So we've got a real challenge ahead of us here. We got to make sure we're sharing it out there. I'm coming for you, Beardy.
He is our number 2 episode ever. Number 2.
Okay.
There is somebody ahead of him. I won't say who, but we can make you number 1. You or number 2.
All right. We're going to work on it.
Yeah.
And then the other thing was that I love the one with Sean Casey too. So I'm lifelong Reds fan, grew up, watching Sean Casey. He was like a star in the 90s when I was, real into baseball. And I actually played that episode for my son, and he loved it, loved hearing the stories. And I just thought there was, so much gold in that episode. It was fantastic. But I told my son this morning, I said, like, hey, I'm going to be on the Tribe of Millionaires podcast I'm recording today. He's like, wow, the one with Sean Casey.
You are the most popular person in your.
So cool,
Yeah.
I'm like, but yeah, when I've talked to people when they've been on the podcast, or I've connected with some people on social media and listened to their podcasts and some stuff, and it's just no matter who I talk to, I already know before I talk to them that they're a go-getter, they think big, they're working hard, they're, driving forward, they got creative ideas, and, not all of us align on values or, some of those sorts of things, lots of people, with no kids, and some people with way more kids than what I have. And, but it's just, no matter who I talk to, I know they're going to be a class A person. And that's just, it just sets the table for a great conversation. I go in every time with anticipation, knowing that, they're going to be awesome.
Yeah, it's funny and it's a community. I say that to a lot of guys, like, it's like moving into the neighborhood, and you become part of it, and it takes time. And for me, it really wasn't until toward the end of year one that I felt like, okay, I'm here. I'm really, like, people know who I am. I know who people are, right? It took that time to kind of build it. But to your point, like you mentioned Sean Casey, I mean, I'm a big baseball geek. I don't even watch it now, but I love the history of it. I grew up near Cooperstown. I used to go there. They have a library. It's not like books on a shelf. Like, you got to put on white gloves. You write out the topics that you're interested in, and they bring out like files of like the 1919 Black Sox scandal. I remember getting like original Chicago Tribune. I felt so like, I can't touch these. They're so delicate.
Yeah.
Like,
oh, that's crazy.
Cool stuff, right? So I love the history of baseball. So with a guy like that, like, I can't, before I joined GoBundance, like we were texting the other day, he had a family thing going on that I knew about, and we went back and forth on text, just checking in with one another. And his podcast, I don't know if you watch it, The Mayor's Office, is like ridiculous. It's him just bantering with other guys, Ken Griffey or whomever, about baseball. But it is cool. It is neat to see all of that. So anyway, I'm sorry, I had to jump in on him, because he was probably, other than this one, he was probably my favorite episode that I've recorded. So
yeah. Well, other than this one, that goes without saying, but no, he's a great guy, and I really, really enjoyed that one.
Yep.
So if anybody listening, if you haven't heard Sean Casey, if you like baseball at all, I mean, just the way he tells the stories. I mean, like, a couple of those stories he told, like, I was just like, man, I felt like I was there. It was awesome.
Right? Yeah. I'm in that final at bat in the World Series.
Yeah.
But what's so cool about that is, and what I loved about him, not this is like a Sean Casey episode, I'll have to send this to him afterward, but is he related it to things that are peak performance related, right? Like habits, and like, he goes back to his breath work in that last at bat, and clearing the sound of the crowd, and going back to these fundamentals where he lines up the bat. I mean, just so cool to hear how he literally went just back to the repetitions he put into a 20-year career or whatever, the basics, right? It applies in business, it applies in personal development, it applies everywhere. So yeah, Sean Casey getting some pub today. His ears are ringing right now.
yeah, exactly.
Wow. All right. Anything else? I'm curious, from the COVID era through now, is there any other key learnings that you had, before we jump over to the one sheet and talk about that? Any other key learnings or things that you did differently, whatever it might be, family, business, relationships, post-COVID, or what you learned from COVID?
Yeah, there's, COVID's like been one of those things. And we're like, literally, when we were recording this, like literally 2 years ago and a day was when, everything shut down.
Yeah, it's St. Patty's Day right now as recording. Yeah. You're right. It was right now 2 years ago. That's crazy.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've been like, my wife and I have been reminiscing kind of all the feels, because I mean, we literally just opened all these businesses. We're mid construction on 3 other projects downtown. I mean, it was a really, really scary time to be, shut down. And then our landscaping business, we were not essential. Then we were essential. Then we were, and it was like right in the spring, and things are going crazy. And then we, people were scared, weren't coming to work. And it was just, really, really scary time. So it's like one of those times where I never would wish for it again, ever. But what I've learned and who I've become through this process, I believe, is just, unlike anything else that's, just changed me, I mean, and it has everybody. I mean, it's changed everybody to some degree. And, something that's really interesting that I've been talking about with some other people, and I'd be interested in your thoughts too, Jamie, just that I've kind of called this, like, I kind of come up with all kinds of different names for it. This is the one I'm working right now, but kind of the great hardening off period for kids. And I borrow that term from landscaping. So hardening off is when, like, when a plant is in the nursery, they're watering it like twice a day, and it's like in a shade house, and it's like very soft, it's very weak, because it's just kind of being spoon fed. It's like a baby plant. And if you put it out in a landscape bed, and it's hot and it doesn't get as much water, it's just going to wither and die. And if you put it out and you water and you still kind of baby it, it still will like wilt and look like it's almost dead. And then all of a sudden it'll get like firm again and grow, and it has to harden off. And so I saw that like in my kids through COVID with our family. I mean, it was really, really hard. Like I remember one night, my daughter, they like, it was like last year. So they like went back to school, and they've been, remote, then they've been hybrid, then they're remote, and then they're hybrid again. And she was crying at bedtime because she wasn't in the same like hybrid class as all her friends. And, she was in second grade, and that was like really hard. And, my son, they struggle with different things, and, they weren't able to play sports, and, couldn't watch Major League Baseball in 2020. And, just all these things where it's like, they had to learn resilience and flexibility. And I think I'm interested to see in 10, 20, 30 years, like how that shapes the generation, how they've become resilient, and like, instead of like everything being handed to them and everything being microwavable or tweetable or, right at your fingertips, we had to wait. We had to be patient. We had to, not get things we wanted. We weren't able to go wherever we wanted. We couldn't eat whatever we wanted. And it was just really a time where I think that we've just kind of relearned some of those qualities that are really, really important. And so I hated it for my kids, but I'm also like kind of excited to say, I think that my kids they're hardened up a little bit. They're hardened off here, from this experience.
That's an interesting way of putting it. Because and I'll relate it, because I think there's some synergy in where my mind goes with this. And I didn't really ever think of it as like COVID created it, but maybe it is the best thing. Here, my general thought, more broadly, more macro, it goes to the saying of what is it, like strong men create weak men create crises, right? And crises create strong men. Does that make sense? Strong men create weak men create a crisis, and the crisis creates strong men. Women, men, whatever. I mean, just that's the saying. So I think that and when I say we, I don't know, 25 to 45 are in the weak men era, right? I think strong men, if you will, come from our parents, the post-Vietnam era through the 70s and the hardship there or whatever. And all of that created the need to create comfort in us. My dad grew up tough. I mean, he had a tough upbringing. Not a lot of stability in his home, and all he wanted for his kids was to give us, to spoil. We were spoiled kids. I mean, I just say it, right? And so, we become those weak folks who are entitled, who feel as though, like you said, it needs to happen now. And then you couple on that the internet era and all of that, the microwave and internet era, right? So, to your point, I've said this. I think our kids are the ones that need to be the next strong generation. Like, I think we're in the crisis time now. A lot of polarization politically, people feeling as though they should get versus do get, socialized mindsets are permeating our society, especially in a democratized country like this, where they, for some reason look past what's happening in Venezuela or other nations like that. So yeah, I it's a really interesting way of putting it. I hope so. I hope that COVID has hardened our kids, because I do think that they are going to have it. I think they're going to have to deal with the collapse of the dollar. I don't think we are. I think they're going to have to deal with a lot of fallout from printing all this money and all that we're going through right now. I really don't think that is an our problem. I mean, we'll have to deal with it at some point. I think the reckoning comes in the next generation. So I don't know if that makes sense, but that's what I think is likely to happen. So if COVID was Mother Nature's way of saying, we know it's coming, let's build some rigidity in these kids today. I hope you're right. That makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, and then like as parents, I mean, it's our job to help them process it in that way, because I think just as easily we could create a victim mentality in our kids, to say like, oh, sorry, honey, like it's just the way it is, so we don't want to do that for sure. No. I mean, we're trying to process this. Yeah. Life isn't fair. Life is hard, and you do have to be flexible, and you do have to figure it out sometimes. And, I hate to be the one to tell you this, but it's a lesson you got to learn now, and it's easier to learn now than when you're old and set in your ways. So
Yeah, it's true. No, I know, right? They're so pliable and amiable, their brains. So
yeah,
interesting
sometimes.
discussion. We'll see what people think. You can drop comments on this video and or
Yeah.
a review in the podcast to get your thoughts out there. So let's go over to age defying health. How about weight and body fat percentage right now?
Yeah. So I've actually I think I lost 10 pounds since I joined GoBundance, and not necessarily any direct accountability, but I think that I just knew that that was going to be like a focus. And then I started doing like weekly weight measurements to plug into my one sheet, and I don't even share it with anybody. It's just kind of a self accountability, but isn't interesting. The old saying, like, what gets measured gets improved.
Yeah.
And so I've just, made improvements there. So I think I'm about like 16% body fat, and 188. I just weighed myself this morning. So
There you go. What's the
lost a few more
diet and
pounds.
exercise routine for you at this point then? What are you doing in those regards?
Yeah. So try to eat pretty healthy. I'm a big like Miracle Morning practitioner, and Hal Elrod, Go Bro. He was one of them. Another one that mentioned, in
Yeah.
a podcast or something about GoBundance, and that was another like, what is this whole GoBundance thing? But yeah, so I run basically 7 days a week, in the mornings as part of my Miracle Morning routine, and that started like really heavily at the beginning of COVID. It was kind of like my coping mechanism. I'd kind of like been running for a few years, 3-4 days a week, but when COVID started and I was working 7 days a week, and it was just like crazy. That was like my time. I'd listen to something positive and run, and man, it just, it's changed my life. Really, I think that just that time to process, and I had some of my best ideas when I was on the treadmill in the basement, about how I was going to overcome some issue that we were dealing with, or whatever.
Amazing how that happens, right? Yeah,
It
100%.
is. It
Family, you
is.
mentioned you're married. I'm going to get what, about 17 years married at this point? Does that sound right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is right.
Okay.
That is
And
right.
what
Yeah.
what about kids?
2 kids, boy and a girl, 11 and 9, Emerson and Olivia. So yeah, third and fifth grade.
Very cool. Have you seen like you mentioned the hardening? Is there like a specific example that you could see with your kids where they showed that grit, if you will, as a result of COVID?
Man, it's just interesting, just the way that I just feel like they've really matured, like through this time. And they've just, again, like setbacks and things that, would normally, I feel like for kids their age, like really, kind of like cause them to sulk and, be sad and stuff. They've just really kind of, I feel like, developed this resiliency that they're just, better at taking stuff in stride. And also, I think, we've spent a lot more time together the last 2 years. I mean, that now, as my wife, sometimes that's it's a little much. She was the one that did all the school from home stuff, and I know there's a lot of people that do homeschooling as well. Do you guys do kind of non-traditional school or
We do Acton, yeah,
homeschooling?
Acton Academy,
Yeah,
which
Acton, yeah,
there's like half a
yeah,
dozen Go Bros that own Acton academies. But yeah, I could not, nor could my wife, I don't think, be homeschoolers. Like we don't have the patience for it. So Acton is like the best thing we could have found because it
all
gives us
right,
away from the traditional kind of a homeschooling environment, and all of the, like you talked about, the skills of conflict resolution and all of that stuff. So yeah,
yes, yeah,
yeah,
yeah. But we spend a lot more time, and they work in our businesses. I mean, they they
that's
they
cool.
they work. We have a thing. If we're working, they're working. We do a lot of events through our event venue as kind of a way of building community and momentum in the downtown. And they'll work in our ice cream shop and sweep floors and move tables and take out trash. And I think that builds a lot of those skills as well. So something
Very
we
cool.
believe is super important for our family.
Very cool. How about contribution? What are you doing in that regard? Is it a financial thing? Is it a time thing, or do you have a specific focus with around contribution? What do you do there?
Yeah, so we're involved in our church. We give through that, both time and money. We've done quite a bit with like clean water projects the last few years. We saw the impact that had in some developing countries, and we were a part of a event called the Global 6K for Water. Some people might might have heard that the average person in developing country walks every day 6 kilometers to go get water, and it's usually not even clean water. It's just the closest water that they have. And so it was an event where you walk or run 6 kilometers, so 6K, and then it was a way to raise money for clean water projects. So we headed that up in our community for a few years, and really, saw a lot of awareness around that. And again, it's a good teaching experience for our kids, and kind of a fun event to be able to do. So, those are some things that are, near and dear to our hearts.
That'll prompt gratitude, right? That's what COVID has
Yeah.
done, I think, too. But I mean, I didn't know that 6K, 6 kilometers every day just to get some water. Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, it is.
How about on the accountability side? Are you in a GoPod? Do you meet often? What does that look like?
Yeah. So about, I don't know, 6 weeks into a GoPod. So, we are a very kind of diverse group, kind of from all over the US. So we were meeting weekly. We've just kind of modified that cadence a little bit. Now we're kind of doing a little more or a little less frequently, but like we're doing breakout calls with, one-on-one with our GoBros in the pod. So it's been really, really interesting. I think that it's helped accountability. I've already seen a couple of the guys like making like significant jumps on stuff that they're doing in their lives, changing workplaces or starting investing. And so it's great to kind of see, GoBundance as a whole and some of the things that different guys are doing. But when you're kind of like doing life together with just a handful of guys, and you really are seeing what they're doing and you're kind of walking along with them, it's very gratifying. I've really enjoyed it so far.
Yeah. My pod is every other week. We've always been that way, and it works. It works for us just with our schedules and everything. It really works out well. What about trips? You have any adventures coming up? Anything that you're planning to do, whether it's a GoBundance trip or your own family type of trip, anything like that?
Yeah. So I am planning on going to Miami. So looking forward.
Nice.
That'll be my first in-person, big GoBundance event. So really excited about that. But yeah, one of our family goals was to travel 8 weeks this year. So that's, nearly double what we did last year. And so, some of that is like, what I know you did, kind of like just going and working from somewhere else, so next week, spring break, we're going down to Florida and going to do it. It's going to be kind of like a little bit of work, a little bit of play. Then we're also meeting with a landscaper, business owner buddy of mine down there. And then we're making a couple of stops places where it's also become our hobby to like study other like communities and like downtown and small town developers. So I'm making some visits like on our way to and from. We're stopping in Nashville and doing a little bit there. So we just love to travel. And then our big trip this year, we're going 3 weeks, kind of all around the US. Out west, we're gonna do a helicopter ride over the Grand Canyon. We're gonna go to a bunch of national parks in Utah. We've done quite a few national parks. And then one of the things that we're doing is kind of fun and unique is that we have a goal to go to every Major League Baseball stadium, all 30, by the time my son turns 18. So we started when he was 8, gave us 10 years. We lost 1 year in 2020 because there's no baseball or no fans. But so on our trip out west, we're doing Denver and Kansas City and Arizona. And so we're hitting those on our loop out there. We've done, I think, 11 stadiums so far. So we're like a little ahead of schedule, but it's a great way to see the United States. And again, we're a baseball family, so we've really enjoyed doing that as well. So that's kind of one of our, bucket list family items. And we're hitting a few of those and hitting some national parks. And so that's going to be a big trip for us.
That's cool, man. The Sean Casey thing is all coming into focus for me now. How big a baseball
Yeah.
nerd you are. I have Shea Hillenbrand. I don't know if you remember him, but I have Shea Hillenbrand coming out soon too. Unless it's dropped. I don't think it did yet, but he's like, this guy is like fired up. Like, Sean Casey is story. Shea Hillenbrand is like, he actually calls himself the white Eric Thomas, like the white ET. Like that's what he said he's been called. Cause he's just like he's all go, 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 go. He's just an amazing dude, an amazing story too. I had no idea the depths he went through in his career. He's a 2-time All-Star, but completely misaligned, I guess, with being a ball player back then. So
yeah.
Wow, fascinating. And I like the baseball goal. I did a 9 stadium tour when I was like 22. So we're working on
Yeah.
unofficially getting to all of them. So all right, let's
Yeah.
end this with
That's
a
fun.
question from the GoBundance card game. And the question is, what mentor did you most recently seek out and what did you learn?
Hmm. Yeah. Okay. Put me on the spot here. So, I've been one. Well, okay. I have, as I said, so one of our stops that we're making on our next trip when we go on spring break here next week is we're going by way of Opelika, Alabama, where there's a guy named John Marsh, fantastic guy, and he has done what we're doing, and he's like 20 years ahead, though. I think he's been doing it for 25 years, and I think between homes and downtown buildings, they've done like 270 places in their community that they've rehabilitated, given new life. And I've really been following him lately. I kind of met him through a friend of a friend of a friend, and interesting how those dots connect sometimes, all starting with the relationships though, right? And just like we talked about at the top of the
Always,
podcast here.
always. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I sought out, kind of getting in front of him and actually having a call with him, and then going to visit him and, learning, I mean, anything that, that you want to do these days, there's somebody that's done it that you can learn from. They've got podcasts, you can read their books, or, some of them, meet in person. But man, there's mentors out there everywhere. And,
Yeah.
So much of what I do is typically through, reading books and listening to podcasts and some of that. But he's the one that I would say most recently that I kind of sought out, specifically as a mentor, and, really looking forward to that.
That's cool. I mean, there's a superhero nature to what you're doing. There really is, because there's some amazing cities, towns that have had this historic, beautiful, like you can see it, that you can almost picture back in the whatever it is, 50s, 60s, 70s, this thriving, booming central place where people went to do everything. And then, as manufacturing declined, as big box stores came into towns, these downtowns sort of got gutted and pulled away
Yeah.
from. But they're still beautiful. Like when we moved to Michigan, that was one of the things we were looking for, was like this sort of idyllic downtown, and we found it. But there's so many towns that aren't that way here, right? That you go to their downtown,
Yeah.
it's like, eesh. So it's cool to know that there's a niche or niche, whatever, of people like you in other parts of the country that you can kind of, get together and revitalize these areas, because it is neat to see. You're making me think about a town I used to live in where it's like, that would have been cool, because I had this like warm feeling for that town, and it was always sad to me that the downtown just wasn't. So, but somebody's got to do it. Somebody's got to do it at some point, and you're doing it. So
Yeah.
unbelievable.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. What's the best way for people to learn more about you, about your businesses, follow you, social media, whatever you want to leave people with?
Yeah. So I'm working on some of that. We're revamping some websites and kind of trying to get a little bit of a structure where everything's kind of under one umbrella and there's links to everything. But they can reach out to me on social media. I'm fairly active on Facebook, Instagram, somewhat LinkedIn. Luke Henry, Luke Henry 12 on Instagram. Can see a little bit of our stuff at mainstreetreimagined.com is our one project. Main Street Reimagined, where we originally started. The Brickyard on Main in Marion, Ohio is our wedding event venue. If you want to kind of check that out and take a peek, got some pictures there of that. And so yeah, I look forward to please do reach out. If anything in my story resonates, or you want to share some war stories, whether it's across any of these things. I kind of have a very wide breadth of different experiences that I've come into. So I love talking to all kinds of people.
Ice cream to grass to real estate to you name it, right? You got weddings.
Exactly.
You've got it all.
Yeah.
You got it all.
Done a little bit of everything.
That's right. I'll see you in Miami. I really appreciate the time today. And yeah, we'll get this up. We'll pump this up. Number 1, number 2, top episode.
Right.
The heck with that bearded dude. And the number 1 guy.
Yep. It's all goatees from here. No beards.
That's right. Look, man, I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Appreciate it, man.